Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman and thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, one-on-one with Dr. Ngozi Ezike as she prepares to step down from her role as Illinois' top doctor. A special Black Voices, Latino Voices crossover conversation, what it means to be a refugee. We examine how different groups of people are treated in a crisis. A bill named after Chicago and Emmett Till awaits a signature from President Biden. The bill's champion, Congressman Bobby Rush, explains what it means for future lynching cases.
This is one piece of a greater whole.
And a new community-driven market is just step one of a revitalization effort in Englewood. First off tonight, this Monday will be Dr. Ngozi Ezike's last day as director of the Illinois Department of Public Health. She's leaving the agency after 3 years of service, much of that time spent leading the state through the coronavirus pandemic. And Dr. Ezike joins us now. Dr. Ezike, thank you and congratulations on taking this next step. You know, your announcement comes, as we enter this new phase of the pandemic. We are relaxing mask mandates, increasing vaccination rates, fewer severe cases. Did you intentionally want to wait until the situation was a bit more stable before making this decision?
Absolutely. This has been a very taxing, rewarding, but very taxing experience, and have been looking for an opportunity. Obviously, the end of last year as Omicron was peaking and record numbers of hospitalization, even more than any other surge, that wasn't going to be the right time. But as we're coming off of the Omicron surge and had these continuous drops in the number of cases and the number of hospitalizations and deaths, I figured this is the time, this is the moment where we're taking a little bit of a breather and that we can, sub out and get a fresh pair of legs and a fresh pair of eyes to take on this incredible work for the department, not just for COVID, but all of the public health issues that we're running.
So you accepted the job in 2019. Of course, 2020, we were in the pandemic. Did you recognize the severity of COVID and the size of the task in front of you right away?
No, I think, in the moment, it was like, oh, okay, this is something that's happening. We see cases first in China. Oh, we see cases in Europe. Oh, we have a first case, in Washington. We know that Illinois, there's no way that Illinois would be spared, but just understanding the magnitude of this experience and the global pandemic, that's not something that we could really imagine, even as we have prepared with the public health department, with our local health departments for something just as this. But, many people have prepared their whole careers, but very few people have actually seen something like this.
Looking back, what would you say were some of your biggest challenges or frustrations?
I mean, I think number one, everyone knows that the biggest setback was the politicization of the pandemic. And so that probably cost many lives to be lost because of how, politics and pandemics don't go together. We saw that very clearly. So that's one thing that clearly stands out, but also understanding and learning how important it is to have the right messengers to be able to communicate with so many varied sectors of our population, making sure that you have those trusted messengers, already have relationship with our local health departments or our state public health departments. We know that the relationships that we formed will have to stay solidified for future public health issues that we want to tackle together.
And what are you most proud of?
I'm proud of all of the people of Illinois who made the important choice to, to get vaccinated, to get boosted, to seek out testing when they were, symptomatic or had reason to suspect that they had been exposed. I salute the people that, isolated and quarantined to avoid spreading infection to others. Without people doing that, we would have had so many more infections and so many more hospitalizations and worse.
Now, during your goodbye speech earlier this month, you spoke about your family and the sacrifices, of course, that they have made to allow you to serve in this position. Here's a little bit of that.
Another group sacrificed a lot in order to allow me to serve. And it's time that I try to make amends for their sacrifices. I want to thank my family. I know my husband's here, and my daughter, my first daughter, is here, and my extended family and my mother for tolerating the absences, the last-minute changes in plans, the endless multitasking, and the ever-present cell phones. You have stood by, and you have supported me, and you have not complained, and you have made dinners, and you've done all the pickups and the drop-offs. But now it's time for me to make you my priority.
So, of course, an emotional moment for you there, Dr. Ezike. How tough of a decision was this to make?
It has been so tough. And the last 2 weeks of saying goodbyes and really just expressing with the team and all the partners, just how much we've been through together and how proud we are of the work that we've done. And there's no ending to the work. And so you can always feel like it's not time, there's more to do. And so it's been this push-pull, tugging about, oh my goodness, can I really walk away from this? This has been such a defining role for me and such an opportunity to grow as a leader. And so it is very hard to step away. Even as I think back about all that I've been through and how I really do need to step away and take a break, it is super hard to do that. And so it's very bittersweet.
Understood. Now, there are reports from WBEZ that Sinai Chicago is working to recruit you. What can you tell us about what is next for you?
I have nothing finalized. I have been very fortunate to have multiple recruiters seek me out. And so I'm very excited next week to definitely engage with those recruiters and talk about what some possible next options could be.
Okay, no, not giving away anything there yet. We've got just a few seconds left, Dr. Ezike. You're leaving the health department as the first black woman to serve this 143-year-old state agency. In about 25 seconds, how does it feel to have broken that barrier and to be a role model for other little girls?
We're on the heels of the International Women's Day. And, the point of that day is to celebrate the achievement of women. I'm excited to have broken a barrier, but more important, I'm really excited to hold the door open, to have fed the pipeline, to have brought more women, more people of color into the agency so that we can not just be celebrating the first, but be seeing the second and the third and the fourth and not be excited to see this, because this will be normalized as something that we see from women and women of color.
Dr. Ngozi Ezike, thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck in your next chapter.
Thank you so much.
President Biden is expected to sign the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act into law any day now. The legislation designates lynching as a federal hate crime. Illinois Congressman Bobby Rush, who sponsored the bill, says he's happy to see it finally pass after more than 200 failed attempts.
Finally, after all these attempts, lynching would be a federal hate crime, and cases like the Armored Armory case would be prosecuted in the first instance by the federal government.
The Anti-Lynching Act is named, of course, after Emmett Till. He was a 14-year-old boy from Chicago, lynched in Mississippi in 1955 after he was accused of flirting with a white cashier. Up next, a special Black Voices, Latino Voices crossover conversation focusing on the treatment of Ukrainian refugees and accusations of racism. Stay with us. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has dominated news headlines with daily stories of families desperate to flee the country. More than 2 million people have left since the start of Russia's attack, finding refuge in nearby countries. Nations have opened their borders and hearts to Ukrainians, happily taking them in. It's a stark difference from what we saw in 2015 when Europe faced another refugee crisis. Some of the same countries accepting refugees now had refused to take in people who were also fleeing war and violence that year. Refugees from Syria, other parts of the Middle East, and Africa. Joining us now as part of a special crossover discussion with Chicago Tonight Latino Voices are Sara Hagdusti, Executive Director of Win Without War; Fasika Alem, the Programs Director of United African Organization; Daisy Funes, Executive Director of Centro Romero; and Laura Washington, a columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times. Thanks to all of you for joining us for this conversation. Sara, I want to start with you, please, with a comparison of the way refugees are being welcomed now compared to the way they maybe weren't so welcome in 2015. Why do you think we're seeing a difference this time?
I think it's very much a difference you can illustrate with two viral photos. In 2015, during the height of the Syrian refugee crisis, the photo that went viral was one of Alan Kurdi, the young boy who had drowned, trying to seek refuge. And today, the photo that's going viral is on the Polish border with mothers leaving strollers so that if Ukrainians are crossing the border who need them, they can have them. And I think that difference is very stark, but what I would like to see is that kind of welcome we're seeing for Ukrainian refugees today be the one that anyone fleeing violence can expect.
Fasika, same question to you. Why do you think we're seeing a difference?
I think it's largely a race issue, honestly. I think we've heard it in the media about how, the images that we're seeing out of Ukraine, hit different because, they're blue eyes and blonde haired refugees, right? And this is not people that we expect to see as refugees versus those that come from the global South as seen as somewhat not deserving of the same kind of treatment and the welcoming. And I don't think the issue here is that Ukrainian refugees don't need to be welcomed. They should be welcomed, but that we need to see the same treatment from those that are fleeing other conflicts elsewhere in the world.
Now, here in the U.S., the Biden administration has said that it would accept Ukrainian refugees if and when needed. Daisy Funes, how do you feel the U.S. and the global community have responded to the Ukrainian crisis versus compared to the crisis at our own border, for example?
Yeah, I think I just can fathom the idea that they can see and understand the consequences of the war, but we're looking at south borders, Central America, for example, El Salvador, where my home country is. They are separating their children from their mothers, kids in cages. There's nothing. So we are disgusted about the same situation, but now when we see Ukrainians and see them looking for help, the media has a different tone. So when they're talking about support and help, so immediately they're giving $3.6 million in support to the Ukrainian and support for them to come receive a TPS. But when we're talking about people that are leaving, they'd rather die in the process trying to get here, but to stay in their home country, do nothing and be killed. So it is heartbreaking, but I think that it shouldn't be an issue if they deserve it. It's the issue is everybody does deserve it, if those are the conditions on every human being.
Also, Americans have come out very strongly in support of Ukrainians, whether it's on social media or fundraising efforts. Sarah, why do you think, or how do you think the public response compares to how the public has responded to other refugee crises?
I mean, it's heartening to see people showing compassion to others who are feeling like fleeing violence or fleeing war. And I was also it was fantastic to see the response when we were accepting refugees from Afghanistan last year as well. But again, I think there's a lot more we can do in terms of extending that compassion to other communities. But beyond that, acknowledging the role the US government has also played in creating systems that are causing people to flee other regions as well, and taking responsibility for that by doing things like increasing the amount of refugees we accept overall in this country, I think is incredibly important.
So I want to switch over and talk a little bit about, some of the reports of discrimination that we've heard of at the border, Ukrainian guards maybe, or people blocking Africans, Indians, other people of color from being able to cross the border. There's one video that has been going viral on social media where it appears to show authorities are blocking Africans from getting on a train. Fasika, what is your reaction to this? Are you surprised by something like this?
I guess horrified, really. Surprised, yes, because when there is conflict of that nature, you wouldn't think that there would be that type of discrimination happening for people seeking refuge, fleeing the conflict. Angry, right? These are people that also deserve the same treatment. These are human beings. And so that second-class treatment that they received, where they were asked to, they prevented from boarding buses and trains, or being told, these taxis that were taking folks from checkpoint to checkpoint were only for Ukrainians, and Africans had to walk the miles in the cold to get to find refuge, was really upsetting, honestly. Yeah.
Officials in Poland and Ukraine have said that there is no specific policy or procedure to prioritize white Ukrainians. Fasika, do you think these are isolated incidents?
And I mean, I don't think so. I think these are also areas, when you look at the reception of immigrants from African countries in those places, and the stories that we hear from Africans in those that have been in those regions, no, I don't think it's isolated. It probably isn't, they probably don't have a policy of discrimination, but it's hard when you have an environment where these types of things are not frowned upon. People will act in that time, act on their biases.
Laura Washington, I want to get you in here. Of course, you wrote a column about this for the Sun-Times. What kinds of stories had you been seeing and hearing?
Well, they mirror a lot of what Fasika just described. And you have to remember that many of these people of color who are coming across the border, they may not be Ukrainian citizens, but they're people who are working and living, some of them long-term in Ukraine, students, medical students, migrant workers, who happen to be people of color, and they're being dramatically mistreated, not only just stopped at the border and refused entry, but in some cases beaten and abused by border guards, by others. The nations say that, the countries say that they're not condoning this, but it's fairly widespread and it's happening. And there's only one reason for it, and that's race. These people are different. They look different. You hear commentary from people that say, in Poland that say, well, we accept Ukrainians who look like us. Well, what does that mean? People who are white. And Ukraine is a fairly homogenous country, so people of color are going to stand out even more in these situations. But there's just no excuse or explanation for this kind of inhumane treatment. When people, as Fasika says, are fleeing oppression, fleeing for their lives, they should all be treated equally, and it should all be welcomed.
Laura, you wrote, and this is a quote, Russian President Vladimir Putin is the criminal in charge of this heinous attack on Ukraine, a nation that's choosing democracy and peace over oppression and war, yet anyone who denies desperate human beings safety at the border because of their race is no better than Putin. So obviously, you know, a lot of frustration and disappointment coming from you in that statement. How tough is it to hear and see these stories of racism happening? You know we have our own issues in this country, but to see them happening in another country so far away.
Well, it's especially frustrating, Brandis, because we're supposed to be in the midst of this national conversation and examination, not national, but international conversation and examination of race because of what happened to George Floyd. And here we are when we're supposed to have this heightened sensitivity, when we're supposed to be reaching out to people of color and trying to build a community when these kinds of things are happening. I know it's a desperate situation there, but even more reason why we have to remember that we're all human beings and there's no such thing as a second-class human being.
Okay, that's where we'll have to leave it. Obviously, a discussion we could keep talking about for quite some time. Thanks to our guests, Fasika Alem, Sarah Hagdusti, Daisy Funes, and Laura Washington.
Thank you.
And please be sure to tune in to Chicago Tonight Latino Voices for more of this expanded conversation. We'll talk about the media's role in covering conflicts. Up next, we take you inside a new community market that's one part of a neighborhood revitalization plan. This week, residents and community leaders in Englewood celebrated the grand opening of the new Go Green Community Fresh Market. It's designed to be as convenient as a neighborhood corner store, but with fresh produce and a variety of healthy options and meals cooked on site. And as Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg reports, it's just one part of an effort to bring new life to Englewood.
A 30-year life expectancy gap just 9 miles apart. So said a 2019 NYU study, which found the average Streeterville resident lives to 90 and the average Englewood resident lives to 60.
And that happens to be the largest life expectancy gap in the country. So Go Green on Racine is really an effort that aims to bridge that gap.
And it's a collective effort, including the Inner City Muslim Action Network, Rage Englewood, E.G. Wood, and Teamwork Englewood. Its first project, the Go Green Community Fresh Market at 63rd and Racine.
The goals of this market are really to make healthy foods accessible and affordable to the community, but also we want to do it in a way that doesn't make it like a specialty food store, right? We want to do this in a way that it still feels like a neighborhood grocery store.
And it's the kind of place that cook and storekeeper Jahari Fultz says many residents don't have easy access to.
My aunt, she actually lives right there. She has to travel and she's older and she doesn't really have like a person like me who is always available to help her. So it's good that, she could just come here.
The market's also set to feature community events and classes and fresh food made on site.
My favorite right now is the chicken taco wrap, to be exact, right? And it is delicious. But besides that, we do have a wide range of, options available that I think the community will love.
But it's not just about creating a place to buy fresh produce and other healthy groceries. Go Green on Racine says it's taking a holistic approach to tackling historic disinvestment.
Just south of the market on Racine sits the former Granville T. Woods Academy, one of the dozens of CPS schools shuttered in a wave of closures in 2013. Go Green on Racine is working to turn it into the Regenerator, which will include 42 units for people returning from incarceration.
We know that returning citizens, many of whom come home to Englewood every year, more than 1,000, struggle with re-entry and especially successfully re-entering society.
So the Regenerator is also set to feature health, wellness, and job supports. Leaders are also advocating for reopening the Racine Green Line stop, which has been closed since 1994, creating a mile-long gap between the Halstead and Ashland stations.
Englewood residents are able to access 280,000 jobs within a 30-minute travel radius, compared to 1 million jobs for a North Side residents.
It's an effort with a lot of angles, but the people behind Go Green on Racine say a holistic approach is the only option.
You provide housing, you provide a place to sleep, you provide health care, you provide a place to eat, you provide great dining options. It all kind of circulates within the economy of the community, which is a benefit for everyone.
And while they're celebrating the grand opening of the Go Green Market, leaders say they know there's much more to do since the project is driven by people rooted in the community.
We take a different perspective than many other folks who come through for one-off projects. There's a longer-term endeavor at stake.
For Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Nick Blumberg.
And Go Green on Racine received a low-income housing tax credit from the city late last year. They hope to break ground on the regenerator in 2023. As for the Racine Green Line station, the CTA told WTTW News that it is aware of the request. But the station would need an estimated $100 million of work or more before it can go back into service, with no funding currently available. And the agency says a 2017 ridership analysis found the station would see fewer average weekday rides than when it was closed in the 1990s. And that is our show for this weekend. Please be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And if you're watching us on Saturday night, know that you can also catch Black Voices and Latino Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. And join me and Paris Schutz next week at 7 on Chicago Tonight. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.